Now let's take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. First off, before we go to our local stories, let's start on the foreign scene where Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the United Kingdom's former royal, has been released from police custody after his arrest on suspicion of misconduct in public office over allegations he sent confidential government documents to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Mountbatten Windsor, who turned 66 on Thursday, had been questioned throughout the day by detectives from Thames Valley Police. Earlier this month, the police force said it was looking into allegations that he had passed documents to Epstein while working as trade envoy. Police officers were investigating him for several allegations that emerged after U.S. authorities released more than 3 million pages of documents relating to the disgraced financier Epstein. Now let's come back home to Nigeria, where the Senate on Thursday threatened to reduce the proposed 58.472 trillion naira 2026 appropriation bill over what it described as unrealistic revenue projections, poor oil performance benchmarks, and persistent failures in capital budget implementation. The warning came during a tense interactive session between Senate Committee on Appropriations and the federal government economic team, where lawmakers openly questioned the credibility of key assumptions underpinning the record budget proposal. Chairman Senate Committee on Appropriations, Senator Solomon Adeola Ogunwest, questioning the credibility of key assumptions of the federal government's 2026 budget proposal, said budget documents originated from the executive and must reflect realistic and implementable projections. He warned that with Nigeria's debt stock hovering around 152 trillion naira and debt servicing costs consuming a significant portion of revenue, the legislature would not rubber stamp projections that could worsen fiscal pressures. Moving on, African Democratic Congress, ADC, yesterday said by signing the controversial Electoral Act Amendment Bill into law, President Bola Tinubu had just signed the death warrant of credible elections in the country. ADC said the ruling All Progressives Congress had drawn the battle line between it and Nigerians and vowed to mobilize citizens to frustrate rigging by any means necessary. The opposition coalition stated that Tinubu's hasty assent to the controversial Electoral Act amendment had corrupted Nigeria's democracy. In a statement by its National Publicity Secretary, Malam Bolaji Abdullahi, ADC questioned the undue haste with which the president signed the bill into law, even in the face of widespread objections by citizens across the country. The opposition coalition declared that the hasty assent was part of the ruling party's elaborate schemes to rig the 2027 elections. Let's move on to Rivers State, where the House of Assembly has halted the impeachment proceeding against the Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara and the Deputy Governor Ngozi Odu. The halt was made today during plenary in Port Harcourt. Speaker of the Assembly, Martin Amewule, informed the House that the withdrawal of the impeachment proceedings follows the intervention of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He also informed the House that all court cases filed by the Governor, the Deputy Governor, and the Rivers State House of Assembly have been withdrawn. The lawmakers also expressed expectations that the Governor and the Deputy Governor will from now on act in line with the Constitution. The police in Kebbi State has confirmed coordinated terrorist attacks on several remote villages in Arewa local government area of the state by suspected Lakurawa terrorists that claimed the lives of over 34 persons. The command's public relations officer, SP Bashar Usman, says the attack left 16 people dead in Mamunu, 5 in Awashaka, 3 in Masama, and 2 each in 5 other villages. The violence forced residents to flee as the gunmen stormed homes and shot at civilians. Security operatives have since been drafted to the area to protect communities, assist survivors, and block the militants' escape routes. Chairman of Arewa local government, Sani Aliyu, says the attacks happened on Wednesday afternoon and security personnel have since been on the track of the attackers. All right, gosh, Rufi, another incident around insecurity and killings in Kebbi State. And of course, talking about the budget, unrealistic projections based on the Senate committee and other stories. Your take on them this morning.
Thank you very much, and apologies that we're a little bit behind schedule. Real quickly, you know, when insecurity started, I think there was a last mass abduction. I said it was going to happen again because we've not set up the architecture in place. And you see, you don't solve insecurity with propaganda. You remember when we finished the Agungu Festival? The government started the propaganda that it was because there had been a stop in insecurity, that's why we could do the Agungu Festival. It's a testament to the fact that things are no longer there. And I just looked and laughed. This happened in Kebbi. 34 people killed in the afternoon, Ayo. So see, when they solve the insecurity problem by putting every mechanism in place and stopping those that have infiltrated the system, we will celebrate them. It's not by celebrating quick wins and half wins, like they celebrated with the Agungu Fishing Festival. Now, Lakurawa has come to strike Kebbi. These are the same Lakurawa that they said parts of them were dismantled in the US airstrike. So what are we talking about? We keep calling on this government to fix the problem of insecurity. Look at what happened to an Ondo monarch that was killed. In fact, there was one part of a reportage that said he was shot several times because the bullet didn't get in, then they had to smash him in the head. Gory killing. Nigeria has become a killing field, and the government should work at it. As regards Andrew, I'm even sad that the UK police have not really looked into the case of Virginia Dufresne, probably because they had an agreement in 2022 where Virginia collected close to 12 million for her charity from Prince Andrew, Randy Andy. Maybe that's the reason. But they need to be able to look into that case. Because this is the UK that keeps talking about the rights of young ones and underage people. Because it will be an indictment if the UK does not look into the case of 8 in line to the throne having sex with a minor, an underage. And nothing is being done. But this one they've arrested him for. It's just like the one they arrested Mandelson for. What are some of the things? He forwarded confidential summaries of official visits as state envoy to Hong Kong, Vietnam, Shenzhen, and others. He emailed Epstein on a confidential brief on potential investment opportunities. Minutes after receiving official reports from advisors, Andrew passed them on to Epstein. It was the Daily Mail that did a report about this about 2-3 days ago. Part of the emails that came out. That's why it was picked up on his 66th birthday. But I think the UK authorities have not still done well enough. Yeah, the king was saying, let the law take its course. No, it should not be about only government, dossier and everything. The real case of Virginia Dufresne and the other investigations that needed to be looked into has to be looked into because Virginia never recovered from it. She died as a result of this. The heartbreak was so much for her. It also snowballed into the fact that Virginia was having a custody battle with her husband over her kids. So the trauma was so much, and it was alleged that she killed her, she shot herself. That must be looked into. The case must not just be allowed to go. We've always talked about the budget, Ayo. We've always talked about the fact that it's not practical. You are going to lend about close to 20 trillion. Even the ones you passed last year, you couldn't even fund the ministries. That's why your argument of, we remove subsidy. And please, for those that support these governments, in a case where we hear that corrupt activity was going on in this administration when they leave, because when they normally leave, we'll see the full story. We will laugh at you. We will laugh at you big time. Because this government cannot explain many things to me. You said you've removed subsidy. You've removed forex subsidy to save money for projects. The MDAs are not getting money for projects. Minister of Interior said he got 0.9 for capital projects yesterday. And now you're saying 58 trillion budget again. You can't even meet it up. Your revenue targets, your crude oil revenue targets and everything, the projection might not be able to meet up. So it's not by Mr. Wale Edu defending and defending and defending. No, he's not a defender. He's not Cannavaro. What we are saying is, please ensure that this makes sense. What does it make sense? How would MDAs not get money to be able to do their work? Look at the one in the head of the DG of a soil, what's it called? Government architecture that was complaining the other day. They were last paid, I was even joking about the fact that we took on one strategy. I was joking about the fact that the last time they really even had anything was under Buhari, that is being the benevolence of their family members that they are living on. So please, we need to look into this matter. And we need to look into this matter strongly. And this government better answer some questions. Till today, they've not talked about better Edu's investigation.
Okay, yesterday, the Senate Appropriations Committee, one of the strongest committees in the Senate of the Federal Republic, met with the various principals involved with management of the economy. And they threatened that they are going to, reconsider the basic benchmarks that the federal government submitted in the appropriation bill for 2026. To wit, a benchmark of $64.85 in terms of crude oil sale projection, 1.84 million barrels per day in terms of crude oil production, GDP growth projection of 4.7%. And that committee, after interacting with the principal officers, including the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, the Minister of Budget Planning, former Governor Senator Atiku Bagudu, and also Abubakar Bagudu, and also the Chairman of the Nigeria Revenue Service, Dr. Zach Adedeji, along with others. Now, I think that committee should not threaten. It should act. It's not about threat. Because we have said it, that those budget proposals are unrealistic. They are too ambitious. They are too optimistic. Now, the major issue is about revenue. Revenue, which is on a low range. 2, very high deficit, creating major fiscal challenges in the budget. Now, the debt service alone is over 152 trillion. Over almost 30% in terms of deficit. And this is what the government has been talking about that they are trying to grapple with. 1, they say they will borrow from the domestic market. Those who know the subject better say when you do that, you will stifle the private sector in the country, particularly at a time when interest rate is over 30% in real calculations. They said they would do a sale of assets, which Dr. Ayotereba, when I interacted with him on Disney Live, says, no, it's a wrong time. We should be talking about value adding through securitization of, our government assets. The third thing is the executive order that government has now introduced with regard to crude oil profits, which government now says to address the problem of revenue, this is what we'll do. But the basic thing for government to do and for that Senate Appropriations Committee to do is to make the budget more realistic. And the best thing to do is to adopt a conservative approach. If you say you are doing 1.8 million barrels per day, at a time when we are not even doing up to 1.65 million barrels per day, so why don't you reduce it to maybe 1.65 or even 1.5 million barrels of crude oil production per day, so that if there is even some kind of boom and you make extra money. That's why we have what is called the excess crude account. You then put that money in the excess crude account. There's nothing wrong in getting surplus. But to just give an ambitious thing that is not realistic, I don't think it's good calculation. A conservative approach is better. Beyond that, the Senate also complained about the fact that, okay, revenue is an issue. And then in the 2025 cycle, government cannot even fund and support budget performance. Minister Edu has a different take. He was assuring them that government is doing everything. But it was Dr. Zach Adedeji who partially agreed with the lawmakers that budget performance should be based on realistic projections. And to that extent, it wasn't as if everybody was talking in the same direction. But that committee, in terms of recommendation, should not threaten. It should go ahead and do whatever is realistic. Now, as for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, I'd like to refer very quickly to 2 statements. Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of Great Britain, made the point that nobody is above the law, not even a former royal figure, the message that was sent out with the arrest of former Prince Andrew on his birthday is that indeed nobody is above the law. Whether your blood is blue or it is red or, well, whatever the category. Maybe some people have yellow blood. Is that you are not above the laws of the country called Great Britain. The King Charles, also supported what has been done. He said the law must take its full course. I think in terms, and that the palace will provide whatever support that it can provide. Now, that in itself, for a democratic society that has a constitutional monarchy, is a very good message to send to the people. So that whether you are working in tech school or you are working at the train station, you know that anybody with blue blood is not superior to you under the rule of law. So, and that's a strong message. The second thing, almost immediately, Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, submitted a 5-page memorandum. He said, in fact, there are aspects that he would also like them to focus upon, which is about the integrity of young underage girls. At the time, Virginia Giuffre, Robert Giuffre, was trafficked, to use that expression. She was just 17. And of course, Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, has already submitted a 5-page memorandum. Republic, a group called Republic, who are anti-monarchists, they have also said they are mobilizing their lawyers to help with investigation. Again, confirming the point that nobody is above the law. Of course, the family of Giuffre, they are very happy, and they are, happy that this would take place. Investigations are ongoing. It's not just about the sensitive information, because at the time he disclosed the information in the mails that appeared in the Epstein files, it was UK trade envoy. So that in itself looked like a sabotage, an abuse of office, misconduct in office, as they have pointed out in the statements that we have seen. And they are searching his house in Sandringham Estate in Norfolk, and also the Royal Lodge in Windsor, which was his former residence. But I think, very good development, so that all of us can know that there's no divine right of kings. Everybody in a democracy is under the rule of law. Finally, just to summarize, Rivers State. Now, Martin Ayemewule, Honorable Ayemewule, and the members of the Rivers State Assembly yesterday said they have withdrawn any attempt to impeach Governor Fubara. All cases on both sides that are in court have also been withdrawn. The governor himself, at an event later in the day, talked about unity, about coming together, about sacrifice. This, it seems to me, is the immediate outcome of the recent change in tone of Governor Fubara. He has severally, repeatedly, even more frequently in recent times, referred to former Governor Wike, now FCT Minister, as my Oga. My Oga did this, my Oga did that. Oga on top. Has won the battle, more or less. But in the spirit of peace, we like the fact that, stability will come to Rivers State, and that both parties, the executive and the legislature, will work together. But the credit for this should go to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, because Honorable Ayemewule himself said this is based on President Tinubu's fatherly intervention. Now the people of Rivers State and their governor and their godfather in Abuja, please, they should give peace a chance. And they should not be distracting the attention of the president of Nigeria. They cannot turn our president into a firefighter that will be coming to settle quarrels among people in Rivers State politics who are not showing enough maturity. Now that the president has intervened for the umpteenth time, we hope that peace will reign.
All right. The intervention of the president, I feel that's one of the biggest challenges here, whereby we keep talking about the fact that Nigeria is a federation with three arms of government, independent of one another, but we see in instances like what's happened in Rivers State, almost an interference by the executive on what's happening at subnational level. The only question I want to ask this morning, one of the big questions I want to ask this morning to the lawmakers when they took Nigerians, and particularly the people of Rivers State, on a merry-go-round is what happened to the 7 charges or 8 charges or allegations against Governor Fubara as a basis for his impeachment. I remember that we've had guests where we talked about and dissected and broke down some of the things that he did that was enough for him to be brought into, to be served an impeachment notice. And now because they've had a meeting with the president, all of it disappears. What happened to the accountability to the Rivers State people? Are they saying that these allegations were trumped up? Were they just made up in order to corner him? And this is the challenge with democracy and government in our country, a lack of accountability. You come out very strongly with allegations against a sitting governor, and then based on a meeting, you say all is forgiven. Yeah, they can withdraw court cases, that's their prerogative, but when you come out as lawmakers to lay allegations of reckless and unconstitutional expenditure of public funds, unconstitutional misappropriation of public funds, hindering the Rivers State House of Assembly from performing its constitutional duties, illegal appointments of persons, seizure of salaries and funds, refusal to implement provisions, withholding. What happened to all those allegations? We want to know, because based on Section 188 of the Constitution, there are steps to the impeachment of a sitting governor president. And one of it is that in subsection 8, it says that in the event that the investigation finds that these allegations are not true, then they can stop the proceedings. But we haven't seen any of that. And so whilst they're saying that, okay, they're hopeful that the governor and his deputy will now work in line with the Constitution, have they themselves worked in line with the Constitution, or have they just taken the people on a ride and then come back later on to say, okay, all is forgiven, go on? What happens again if another impasse happens? They would go running to the president, or the president will come in again to intervene. It just sparks of some sort of a level of non-accountability and taking the people for granted in Rivers State. But as it said, at the end of the day, peace is hard. The most important thing is that now, having spent almost close to 3 years in office, the governor has spent more time battling political issues than actually facing the issue of government. A lot of the stories that have come out of Rivers State, unfortunately, has been a fight between political godfather and political godson, a fight between a State House of Assembly and people, just a waste of the people's time, and it's quite a disservice to those who voted for governance in the state. But moving on, it's peace time. Let's see what he can do in the last few months of his tenure, and hopefully the people can finally breathe in Rivers State. Now, moving on away from that to the story around accountability and the United Kingdom. This is the picture of accountability. The only side of that, based on already analyzed stories on this, is that the United States, the President of the United States has, of course, come under scrutiny, because now people are saying that if the UK is taking steps, we've seen some big names, Mandelson, now Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor, have come under investigation, and he's been released now, but he might be rearrested if they find enough, the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, find enough evidence that he needs to be charged to courts, then he might just be rearrested. But what they're now saying is that look at accountability, whereby the king himself was said not to have been informed pre the arrest of his brother. The king himself has released a statement showing that he was in support of the rule of law. That what's the United States of America, lack of accountability. We haven't seen big names as such being brought in for questioning, and we haven't seen any arrests at that level being made in the United States. When asked, the President of America was asked a question around his response to the arrest of Andrew, former Prince Andrew. He said it was quite a shame. In fact, he kept saying, I've been exonerated, so I can make a statement on this. I've been exonerated, I can make a statement on this, and kept saying, such a shame, such a shame, such a shame. But the big question for him was that would high-profile people in the United States also be seen in handcuffs, especially people that were named in the Epstein files and an investigation conducted? talking about accountability and transparency in government. But I mean, we'll continue to see how this pans out. I don't think it's who yet for former Prince Andrew. And of course, the big conversation is also how this would affect the royal family. Would this be a stain on the king himself? Former Prince Andrew is still 8th in line in succession to the throne. But let's see. And hopefully we'll talk about this in further detail when Adefemi comes. Amongst other stories, during newspaper headlines, and of course, we'll be.